Okay, I guess the first question would be, which places in New York City did you happen to photograph, and what did you photograph?
My photographic work was, as I said, primarily in Lower Manhattan. I was living with, I would often stay with my friend who had a loft on Water Street, Barbara Mensch. And I would leave from that five-story walk-up, which from California was seemed very daunting, down into the street with my, and I carried a Rolleiflex camera. It's a twin lens camera that you don't see very much anymore, but it is, even then it was pretty unique. So showing you that. Yeah. So it's an old-fashioned camera and you look at it through the top like this. And so I would, and they make square pictures. So I would photograph everywhere I went. I would be, I would just bring my camera. I didn't have always an agenda. It was really just go someplace, but always photographing.
And mm,
What did I photograph?
yeah.
Part two. I photographed the life on the street, anything that caught my attention for the most part. I think coming from San Francisco at that point, it was really exciting to be in a place that had so much more density. San Francisco is, is a city where people drive and, they do, there are sidewalks, we do walk some, and there is a bit of a subway system, but there's like, 700,000 people, there's not millions. So you just don't have that sort of complex street life unless there's some events happening or certain pockets of the city that are busier than others. But New York was sort of like, you know, much more of a fertile ground for taking photos. And I think that'll be proven by how many amazing pictures have been made in the city.
And I know you were also explaining about this before, but what was the, social and economic climate like in New York City?
I think that the difference of the social and economic climate from now would be that we were all coming out of a really big recession that had happened in the 80s, in the late 70s, early 80s. And the city, when I first started going in the 70s, was uh, really, really fraught. I had thought to move there, but it was beyond what I could even, and I'm pretty tough. And I thought, no, it's in the areas where the artists were living, if you weren't already pretty well established, it was rough. It was very, very rough. I mean, there were definitely things that I have unfortunately now become accustomed to, but at the time didn't have familiarity with seeing people shooting up on the streets, and so walking over bodies, so to speak, which was, and trash always in the street. And then there were the strikes, which I think still happen from time to time, but they were sort of ongoing. So the economics were, it was perhaps a bit more affordable, but still seemed expensive. And when I thought about going and being an artist in New York in the 70s, I thought I'm going to have to be a waitress, 50 hours a week. I'll never have time to do any work. So I opted for San Francisco, where the economics were better.
And has your work been recognized by New York City itself?
You know, um, the book that I did, Red Eye to New York, which references the fact that I always took the cheapest flight in the middle of the night, uh, sold out really pretty quickly, and it got acknowledged in the Guardian. I don't know, maybe you'd have to look on my website because I think I put all the uh, reviews and the like that came uh, in relationship to that book. Um, but it has not yet, is the operative word. I think there's the Museum of the City of New York has a print. So I'm hoping, that that can evolve and become a more, that that can go better.
And how do you feel like your photography, I guess, in some way has impacted the city, especially, from a, I guess, like a insider and also an outsider perspective?
There, one of the things that I have found to be more, more engaging part of my practice is that because it's taken a while for the work to see daylight, that by the time it gets published or shown, it's already maybe, 40 years later. So it becomes a bit of like a family album, when you have a kind of sentimental moment where you look back at how things were. I know there's been a lot of comments online about, wow, I remember those moments and how it was. I think it's important to think of the work as an archive that holds time still so that we can sort of reflect on where we come from. And I respect that really integral part of photography's art as an art form. That yeah, that I'm really interacting with the real world and trying to create a record of it.
And I know again, you said you're from San Francisco, but I guess have you recently made any like trips to New York City or like taken some time to photograph New York City?
No, I'm definitely continuing to photograph in New York. I'll be there for 3 weeks in the fall. I always bring my camera. It is not as easy as it once was. I think that there's a kind of disappearing act that is happening because people are on their phones. And when they're on their phones, they don't have any expression on their face and they're not in the world. They're not really there. They're like shadows of themselves because their minds are someplace else. And so photographing people while they're talking on their phone uh, is a little limiting in a way. You don't have the full experience of engaging with people the way I did when I would photograph in the 80s. So that's problematic, but I still, feel compelled to continue to photograph. I um I think that there's a kind of continued intensity that because I don't live there, that I can see it in a way that is it remains fresh. At one point, I stayed for a longer period of time. I was doing some project unrelated, and I had to be someplace on the subway every day at 8 o'clock, and I got to be immediately just like a New Yorker, like show up, get on the train, get there, and I stopped seeing the city because I had an agenda. I had to be someplace. I had to do something. And so I realized the freshness of coming from out of town and just bringing my openness and my energy to see things new.
And do you feel like, I guess, I feel like I think you explained this before, but you can add also any more words into it. But how do you feel like New York is different from how it was then to how it is now?
I think the biggest difference is the quantity of Starbucks and other stores that have moved in where there were once independent store owners. And I'm not sure. I haven't been in New York for a little while, but I know there's a lot of vacancy here in San Francisco because of so much online shopping now. And New York has enough people that that may not be as big an issue, but I think that the independent store owners, retailers made being on the street have texture and interaction and a kind of flavor to it that was more exciting. But ultimately people just want to have what's familiar, and they know if they go to whatever store that they always go, that they went to back in Oklahoma, then when they get to New York, they won't feel so alone. They can just get back to their chain store of whatever it is. And, I think the numbingness that comes from that sense of familiarity and the lack of adventure that that involves really takes away from the urban experience.
And I guess one more question. If you could look back and I guess choose any photograph that you took in New York City. Um, would you maybe, I guess, like change it in a way or maybe kind of explain what was the process behind that photograph?
There is one photograph that people really seem to have identified as the most successful one of this project. And I love the picture myself. And you can see it in my website. It is a photograph of a man sitting at a table and he's dunking his sandwich into his coffee. Uh, right? I thought at first it was a sweet roll, which made sense, but it appears to be a sandwich. And I just happened to be ready to make the picture. And I think that that is the quintessential nature of street photography, even though this is inside a restaurant, actually. It was on the corner of Union Square. And now it was a Starbucks. I don't know if it's still a Starbucks. I went back and found it the other day. But I was photographing my girlfriend while we were having breakfast. And so I stood up and I started walking out of the restaurant and I just took one shot. And it was a good moment and the background reinforces the foreground with the content. And so there's a conversation that's going on a few different levels. And that to me is a successful photograph. Yeah, and of course I love all my little pictures. They're like my kids. You know, I've spent a lot of time with them. So I think that one is emblematic of what I hope to get when I make a successful picture.
And I guess, is there anything else you like to add for the interview?
Well, things change, cities change. There's no question about it. And if we don't engage with the politics and the of a city, then it'll go on without our input. And I think you have to be active. And I think we also have to be active in how we vote with our money. And if you want to have a lively urban life, you have to support the stores that you care about. So you need to, think about your money as your vote in a lot, and the newer restaurants or small tiendas or what have you, bodegas that come in, pay attention to and get to know the people on your street. I think that's another really important thing that with all of our busy lives online, that the awkwardness of a social interaction on the street can be easy to avoid. But at the end of the day, we really are social beings in real time. So get to know your neighborhood.
Oh, I agree with everything that you just said. And I'm also really happy to be talking to you, especially because I remember I was doing, I guess, research not too long ago about like New York City back in the 80s, and I've always been very fascinated by the scene during that time. And just looking at your photographs and looking at other photographers' photographs, I'm like, wow, like there was very much, it seemed very much alive. And not to say New York isn't as alive as because it's still alive, but it just seemed like it had a heart, you know. So, and you really did capture that, if that
Oh, well,
makes sense.
yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. You know, it's trite to say I love New York, but it is, it's interesting to note in that context that the I Love New York campaign would be worthy of an investigation because when I first came, that hadn't happened yet. And it didn't appear that anyone did love New York in the early 70s. It was in desperate need of some love. And it was a campaign that came, I think, before, there was a deficit. And by changing the way people thought about it, I think, created a new way of experiencing and engaging with the city. So I think that that's an important thing to realize. The social response is real.
I
Adver- it was an advertising campaign.
oh
I
oh
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
and
So yeah.
uh, I guess also one more thing I wanted to add. I've also myself have been I guess getting into photography. I wouldn't call it, I guess, a business yet, but just more so a hobby. And I've lately been buying like these retro cameras, like these cameras from
Mm.
the 80s and the 70s.
Mhm.
And I have this one camera. It's a Fuji like TY300, and I think it basically came from the 80s, and but it's still, functional, and it still works. And when I saw that the camera that you brought, I was like, that's so cool because I've always wanted to have a camera like that. So I guess like, do you have any advice on, guess, where to start, especially with working like cameras like that?
Well, there, this is from 1960. And when I was your age, I was really excited to look at 1960, right? We always have like our 1940s to me were the, historical and very intriguing past. But I think ICP, International Center for Photography, has a lot of classes in photography. And I think that would be a interesting place to start to poke around and see. I mean, NYU, I'm sure offers photo classes, but I would start, looking at the possibility of those kinds of interactions. NYU's be economically probably a better way to go. But ICP has a very active photo program. I'll actually be out for a book signing in October for ICP for a book called Too Many Products, Too Much Pressure, which is about my dad who sold beauty supplies to beauty shops in Los Angeles. So it was a very personal take on the economics of Los Angeles and also the beauty business of the era, which had its own character.